Hey everyone, my name is Sam, and welcome back to Respect Your Elders. You know, I've been thinking a lot about Konami lately, and with friggin' Kojima leaving the company and the cancellation of Silent Hills, and with the funding of Koji Igarashi's Bloodstained, it has me just hungering to play a Castlevania game. But what should I play? Well, let's see, we got your Symphony of the Night. Oh, what about Bloodlines? Or maybe even some Super Castlevania 4. Maybe some Rondo of Blood? Oh god, no, not that. Nah. Well, I guess you can't go wrong with the original. Man, Castlevania. What a great series of games. Well, it's not free of a few stinkers here and there.
What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets!
The better entries more than make up for them. And what better to talk about than the first game in the series? Whenever I play the first Castlevania, I can't help but think of all the old 1930s Universal monster movies. Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, all the classics. And if there was any doubt that Castlevania was inspired by these movies, just look at the title screen. It looks like it's supposed to be on a film reel. Simon's Quest does the same exact thing too, but the game is crap and no one likes it, so moving on. Developed by Konami, Castlevania was released on the Famicom Disk System in Japan in 1986 under the title of Akumajo Dracula. It was then ported to cartridges and released in North America and Europe in 1987 and 1988 respectively. At the same time the Famicom Disk System version was being developed, a version of the game was created for the MSX2. It was released in Europe under the name of Vampire Killer, which I think is a pretty appropriate name. This version of the game had different levels and even different structure as far as game design is concerned. In the game, players were required to find various keys before moving to the next room. There were also other elements that would be seen in later editions of the Castlevania games, like shopkeepers and different ability buffs. Not only that, but because the player was forced to find keys, this made the game non-linear, as opposed to the extreme linearity that Castlevania is based upon. However, when Castlevania was released, it was met with generally positive reviews. Now, what makes Castlevania so great? Well, you could chalk it up to a lot of things, but we're going to break down the game piece by piece to figure that out. As far as the plot is concerned, there isn't really too much to be all that concerned about. All you need to know is that Count Dracula's castle has appeared after 100 years, and you as Simon Belmont must send Dracula back to hell. Honestly, the game really doesn't need much more story than that. This is one of the cases where less story is a good thing. All I need is that glorious scene staring out at Dracula's castle. Alright, I'm good to go. Let's kill some monsters. Right from the get-go, you should know that you're in for a treat. Looking back on this game, this is easily some of the best 2D action platforming in any 2D game of all time. Unfortunately, Castlevania isn't without its flaws, but we'll get to that in just a second. The game is split up between 6 linear stages, and while that doesn't seem like a lot, trust me, it will take a while for you to get through them. Simon's basic means of defense is the legendary whip known as Vampire Killer. Talk about original names. The whip can be upgraded 2 times. The first is a strength boost, and the second upgrade increases the whip's length. If you die, the whip goes back to normal. Upgrading it isn't that hard considering that there are plenty of opportunities to find the upgrades needed for it. To do this, you can whip candles throughout the stages. The more common item you'll find in the candles are hearts. Despite the generic use of the heart in video games, the hearts essentially give you ammo for the various sub-weapons in the game. In fact, you gain health by eating pork chops that are hidden in various walls of the castle. Man, Simon must have a stomach of iron. The sub-weapons include an axe that has an arc-like attack, a throwing dagger, holy water, a cross that acts like a boomerang, and much more. Depending on the situation, each sub-weapon will need to be used at some point, just to make sure that you don't take extreme amounts of damage. For instance, take the hall before you fight the Grim Reaper. It's best to use the cross in this hallway so that you can destroy the knight's axes while simultaneously whipping the Medusa heads and killing the knights. Not to mention that this is one of the hardest parts in the game. But, moving on. What makes Castlevania's gameplay so great is the fact that you can't just rush into any situation without doing a brief moment of thinking through it. If you screw up, you most likely tried to push it. Either that or you were pushed back into a bottomless pit. Just like Ninja Gaiden, Simon gets pushed back whenever he is hit. As you can imagine, this makes things a bit more difficult, and not to mention more cheap. With enough perseverance, this game can be beat. It just might be a little bit hard to do. Of course, this game wouldn't be nearly as great without all of the awesome music in the game. Seriously, every track in the game just gets me pumped to push further into the depths of Dracula's decrepit castle to see what awaits me. In fact, you can find a lot of these tracks in later Castlevania games too. The music works in tandem with the visuals to give the game that perfect theme of gothic horror and mystery. And while this game is by no means scary nowadays, I still consider it to be a pretty great influence on horror games that would come out afterwards. And speaking of horror, one of the biggest aspects of this game is the end stage bosses. There's a giant bat, a mummy, Medusa, and even Frankenstein makes an appearance. If there was any doubt that this game wasn't trying to pull from the tropes of early horror films, you have your proof now. But we all know who the real star of the show is. It's time to face Dracula. As Simon ascends the staircase to face his destiny, he must first farm the crap out of the candles, or else he's screwed. Dracula actually has two forms, which makes this fight one of the hardest in the game, because there's no chance to replenish any of your health in between. The initial fight is easy enough. Jump over the flames, whack him right in the head until it flies off. Then the real fight begins. But there's a simple little trick to beating him. Grab the holy water from the leftmost candle at the beginning of the fight, and then just spam the crap out of it once he goes to his second form. And that's it. After that, you win. Simon watches the destruction of the castle from a distance. A spoof reel of credits begin to roll. It's just a shame that the creators didn't put their names in such a masterpiece of a game. Plus, the credits are just the worst kind of jokes. Seriously, like, puns are the worst. And that's Castlevania for you. One of the games that would spawn a freaking mammoth of a franchise, and one of the classics on the NES. Now, you can pretty much download it just about anywhere on the Virtual Console. There's a bunch of ports for it, and even finding a cartridge really shouldn't be all that difficult. So yeah, this has been Respect Your Elders, and I will see you guys next time. Later.